So here we are, the last chapter of the Afghanistan story. I had a thought this morning. I was watching the previous episode last week to get my thoughts in order for this morning, and I thought, and of course there's been developments all along the last 7 days, and been some comments on these videos that I found a little irritating. Some people talking about, you go into Afghanistan because of things like 9/11 and stuff like that, right? So I'm just going to put this out there, and you can take it any way you want. But I was in Afghanistan, and I saw exactly how the society operated. They are a strict Muslim Sharia law country. Men are in charge 100%. Women are nothing but property. They're covered from head to toe in burqas. If you touch a woman, you can have your hands removed or be killed outright. If a woman touches a man, another man that's not her husband, death. And on it goes. If you're homosexual, death. If you stray from any of the strict Sharia law, the penalty is usually death or dismemberment of some kind, or loss of a limb. Stealing is a loss of a limb. It's unbelievably barbaric. Let me tell you somewhere else I've been. Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, men are in charge 100%. Women are property. They wear burqas head to toe. If you touch one, you're in danger of being killed. If a woman touches a man, she's in danger of being killed. Homosexuals are executed. Exactly the same thing, right? The man who blew up the Twin Towers in New York City was a Saudi. So why aren't we going into Saudi Arabia? Why is Afghanistan suddenly a human rights catastrophe when Saudi, which is exactly the same, is not? Well, because Saudi controls the world's oil supply. That's why. So that gives you a good idea right there why wars happen. They have nothing to do with the conditions on the ground of civilians. They have to do with money and the manufacture of materials to fight wars. Nobody's going to go into Saudi. Why didn't they blow up Saudi when 9/11 happened? That's where bin Laden was from. The Americans all knew the bin Ladens. Funny how that works, eh? Yeah. Yep. Funny how that works. So, me and Corporal Preed spent quite a bit of time together. He spent a lot of time with all of us because he was photographing us continually. And I remember him and I went to breakfast one day in the mess. He happened to have his weapon with him, so he walked me over to the mess hall. And we sat with a guy at the table there who had this immense long rifle on the floor beside him. And this guy looked decidedly unfriendly. But I sat right across from him, you know, and I started talking to him. He didn't seem like he was going to talk to anybody, and I started talking to him, and he lifted his head up from his breakfast. I said, what do you do? And he just looked at me. And if you've ever heard the term 1,000-yard stare, I never really knew what it was. I mean, I've seen actors imitate it. But this guy, he had these pale, pale blue eyes. And when he looked at you, it looked like he was looking right through you to something that to some threat, possibly, that you weren't even aware of. And it was incredibly disturbing looking at this guy's face. It really was. But also awe-inspiring. I was seeing suddenly another dimension of the world just by looking at this guy's face. And he looked at me, he said, I'm a sniper. And all of a sudden, everything clicked in. His rifle was all like covered in ghillie material and camouflaged. And I said, man, that must be tough. And he's like, yeah, it's boring sometimes. I said, really? He said, yeah, they dropped me off in the middle of the night somewhere on a hilltop with enough food and rations for a week and water. And I live in the bag for a week. And I was like, live in the bag? He said, yeah. I piss in a bag. I eat out of a bag. Drink out of a bag. And I lay motionless, sometimes for days, waiting for my target. And I was like, holy shit, really? He said, yeah. He said, it's a very specialized thing. Not everybody can do it. And I said, well, no shit. And I said, do you actually, you know, it was a stupid question, but I asked him outright. I said, have you killed many people? And he said, all kinds of them. And I said, there must be high-ranking targets. And he said, yes. They're people, they're warlords and warlord underlings and people that have to be taken out because they're in charge of, you know, building IEDs and they're in charge of you know, networks of Afghan spies who are running around finding out what our movements are going to be, and so they have to be eliminated. And I was like, yeah. I was like, Jesus. So that was just out of fucking control, that conversation. And he turned out to be a very nice man. And I shook his hand. I said, I wish you the best of luck. I hope you get out of here. And he said, yeah, me too. He said, I sure do hope to get out of here. Imagine, you just dropped in the desert all alone, and there's nobody to help you. All you've got is a sidearm and this long rifle and a scope and enough rations and water to last possibly 7 days. Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't even understand how somebody can do it. But, obviously, he did it, and there's lots of others that have done it. And, yeah. So, finally came time to head out to Kabul. So, they took us down to the trailer there where we entered the base in the air-conditioned trailer. And Corporal Preed went with us, and he saw us off, and I said to him, "You're coming with us, right?" He's like, "No, I got to go. We have to fly back to the PRT to drop off." I don't know if he was dropping off or picking up a piece of equipment that had to come back to CAF, or some personnel or something had to be picked up. He said, "I'm going over there to help get that done. And then as soon as I get back here, I'll hit the next Hercules and come up with another bunch of soldiers that are coming up. Some British soldiers that are going up to Kabul." He said, "I'll go up with them." And I said, "Okay." Well, and I hugged him. I gave him a hug. I said, "You take care, and I'll see you in Kabul, you know." So anyhow, we get on this Hercules aircraft, and we did a tactical takeoff out of CAF because they were afraid of being shot at. And they didn't, I shouldn't say afraid. None of these people were afraid. These were the bravest bastards I ever seen in my life. They were afraid of nothing. And so, anyhow, we get in this plane, another Hercules, and strap in, and we start to take off. And man, this plane is old and heavy, and I'm thinking, holy shit, it was something that you just can't imagine it. I was looking at the windows, and the plane was just, 300, 400 feet off the ground, going 1,000,000 miles an hour, it seemed, just left and right and left and right, and just of like all this, avoidance technique that was going along the floor of the valley, and we're heading for this huge mountain, right? And I looked around, and our escort, our buddy, says, "Hang on, because we're going to pull serious G's when we go up the side of this mountain." And I didn't know what serious G's were. You think you know what it feels like in an aircraft, in a commercial airliner, when the plane goes up suddenly. Man, that's nothing. I mean, I never saw commercial air flight the same way ever again after I was in Afghanistan. When he hit the bottom of that mountain, he put that plane straight up. And I was crushed down in my seat so hard that I blacked out, because I was on blood pressure medication at the time, which made my blood pressure a little lower than normal. And when that plane went, all the blood rushed out of my head. And I just remember getting crushed. And they said, they warned me, said, when we pull all these G's, you've basically got to scream to get your blood pressure up high enough to keep from blacking out if you're not used to this, right? We're used to it. But I forgot to scream. So I blacked out for a couple seconds. And when I woke up, all of us were floating in the air. He had got over the mountain and then just fell down the other side, and we were weightless. It was the weirdest feeling there's no way to describe it. I looked around, and there was like a pop can floating in the air, and everybody was laughing their asses off, and I was like, holy fuck, we're going to die. And then all of a sudden, he pulled out of that, and again, we kind of pulled not as bad the second time, but yeah, so that's just, I was just blown away by that. That was something that I'll never forget as long as I live. These guys did this shit on a daily basis. So the rest of the flight to Kabul was completely uneventful. And we land at Kabul airport. A civilian airport, right? And I'm thinking, civilian airport. This is interesting. And we get off this plane and we go into the terminal, and it's surreal. Like, there's soldiers everywhere. Every entrance and exit is heavily guarded. We go inside, and there's like, it looks like a sort of like an airport in there, but everything's upside down world, and like there's food vendors and stores, but there's nothing in there that you even recognize. And we were starving. Me and a couple of the guys from the Fables went to this, food court, which was like 2 places, and ordered, I don't know, I think it was supposed to be like a hamburger or something. I'm not sure what it was, actually, to be honest. And we tried to eat this fucking thing, and it was just like, I couldn't do it. I was like, I looked at him and said, "Can you eat this?" And he's like, "I don't know, man." Like, you're not sure if it was like cat or rat or dog or what the fuck it was. It was not good. And all the produce in Afghanistan was just horrendous. It tasted horrible. It was wilted, and it was just, I don't know. I just don't know how anybody even lives there. I really don't. And so we get ready to go to the base in Kabul. So these Canadians all show up in these armored Mercedes SUVs. And of course, we're like full flak helmets, everything, right? So we can't all go, obviously, in the same vehicle. There's 4 or 5 or 6 of these vehicles that come for us. And I end up, they put 2 of us in the back seat of each of these vehicles. And we're in a line. We're in this queue waiting to go out this gate. And the 2 soldiers look around at me and they say, "Okay, here's the rules." And I thought, oh no, now what? And they said, "Okay." And they started looking at me. I don't know why. I don't know who was with me, but they were ignoring them. For some reason, they just kept talking to me. And I was like, "Oh, okay, yes, sir." The guy goes, "See that thing over your shoulder?" I looked up, and there was a box with a switch on it. He said, "That's a jamming device." He said, "It jams cell phone signals, which is how we keep people from suicide bombing us." He said, "Don't think that these people have the switch on them. They don't. They're bound in explosives sent into the crowd, and someone remotely with a cell phone calls a number, and the person blows up." I was like, holy shit. He said, "So if I tell you to hit that switch, hit it, because it only works for a little while. It only jams for a little while, so it's not something we leave on. So just, if I say hit it, you hit it." And I said, "Okay, yes, sir." He said, "If you see anybody, I don't care if it's man, woman, child, bicycle, goat, wheelbarrow, anything. If you see anything rushing towards this car, you hit that switch and do not get out of this vehicle." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "If we have to stop, and if we get out," and he's talking to his buddy driving, he said, if we get out, don't get out unless we die. If we die," he said, he says, "You see that tube right there beside you?" And I looked over, and there was a bazooka clipped, a rocket launcher clipped right behind me. He said, "You pull that pull that out of there." He said, "All you have to do is grab the back end, pull it out, and and you point and shoot." And I was like, "What?" He's like, yeah. He said, don't be, he said, pull that out of there and fire it at whatever you can see. And I said, okay. And he said, this is the most dangerous 900 meters that you will ever be in your life. He says, don't fuck around. Listen to us. Watch everything we do. If anything happens, this is how it goes down. So I'm sitting there in the back of this SUV with my pants full of shit, and I'm looking around at where we are. And this place it's a shithole. I have never seen anything like this in my life. There's all these people walking around, hundreds of these people walking around the street. Most of them look like beggars, dressed in rags, and women in burqas. And then there's some little children, little girls that have no covering, and they're dressed in school uniforms, which I thought was great. And just these people just wandering around in the dust. And, it's not as hot as Calf because it's so high up the mountain. Thank God. But there's no air. Like you're trying to do something and you just get out of breath in 10 seconds, right? And so off we go. And we're driving less than a kilometer, 900 meters from the gate of the airport to the gate of the base. And I'm telling you what, it was the longest 900 meters of my life because we couldn't barely move. There was so many people walking around, crossing the road and fucking around that we were just crawling through this throng of people on this shit dirt road. And I'm thinking, it's no wonder people get killed here. I mean, how easy is it to just walk right up here and blow us to fucking smithereens? And he said, he looked back at me, all right, you got the button? I was like, yeah, I'm ready. And I had my fucking thumb on it. And he said, yeah, we're okay. And he said, just keep your eyes open. If you see anything, he said, holler out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm watching. We're all watching everywhere. Finally, we get to the gates. And what was really bizarre is I'm in Calf. The Afghan people there were definitely not armed. They weren't armed. They were treated as enemies, but let in as long as they behaved, They would come in and have a market in Calf every Saturday. And there was never any bombings or grenades launched the day before that because people wanted to get in and sell their shit and make some money, And I remember walking through there, I bought a whole bunch of stuff from these old Afghan men and their children, and they're all there. And I remember this one little boy, no more than 6 or 7 years old, rushed up to me with this little card of little vinyl fridge magnets, and he was like, 25. He wanted a quarter, right, for this little card. So I pulled out my money and I gave him a $5 bill, a $5 American bill. And his eyes got so big. And he just ran. He took off running and yelling and screaming. And to what turns out to be his father. And one of the soldiers looked at me and said, what did you do? I said, I gave him $5. He said, what? He said, man, that is a month's fucking wages for these guys. That's what they make a month if they're lucky is $5. You just gave that man a month's pay. And the little boy had run over and got his father, and pointing at me. And for a minute there, I thought I was in trouble. I thought I'd done something wrong. But then the father came over. And man, he thanked me and thanked me and thanked me. And he didn't speak hardly any English. He just kept, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then he grabbed me by the hand, and all these fucking soldiers just kind of did this, but they hold hands when they're walking. The men do. And so he grabbed me by the hand, and he took me over to his stall and was like, choose. He wanted to give me something else for the money, right? And I ended up getting a giant tarantula sealed in lucite. and I gave him another $1. Well, he just about shit. But that was how the Afghans were, interacted with us at Kandahar. We pull up to the gates of Kabul base, and the fucking Afghans are standing there armed to the teeth. And I'm thinking, what the hell? This is really, really bizarre. The gate to this base is guarded by armed Afghan. And they had no uniforms. They looked like Taliban. And just standard fare, And so in we go. Everybody had to stop and stick their weapons and clear their weapons in this big bin. And in we went to this base. And we pull up, park the vehicles along this fence. And it's a beautiful base. Very clean, well organized. There's some actual, concrete buildings there. And we found out the hard way how thin the air was, because we were sleeping on the 3rd floor of this big building that was air conditioned and heated, because it got quite cold at night. And man, you could only make one landing before you had to stop and rest. You got one flight of stairs, and you're just like, you just couldn't get any air. And everybody was the same way. It wasn't just me. It was all of us were just overcome by the lack of air up there. But they were telling us, you'll get used to it. 24 hours, you won't even notice it. And that was true. As a matter of fact, I started to feel better there again, because it was so dry. It was so, there was a bit of humidity there, but still dry. And this thin oxygen, this thin air, and it really did make you feel kind of cleansed, And so, we got everything packed away, and then we went over to this. The whole base was British soldiers, and there was a contingent, I think, of 7 or 8, 10 Canadian soldiers that were left there, and we had our own little Canadian spot off to right by the parking lot where all of the patrol vehicles were. And we were just the small contingent left there. We had a medic, we had, technicians. There was a big tent with a recreation place, had a giant screen television and a pool table and pinball machine and sofas and coffee tables. And then we had coffee and all kinds but it was, a much smaller scale than CAF, but it was really interesting. And so we went underneath there and sat with these guys. There was one of those camouflage nets over the area where we were sitting in this common place, sort of like a little living room. And so we were sitting there, and somebody rushed out of a tent and said, they shot the Chinook down today. And I said, what Chinook? And the guy said, there was some Canadians on it too, and they were leaving CAF to go to the PRT, and they didn't make it over the mountains. They got shot down. All hands lost. And I said, how do we find out who was on that aircraft? And he said, well, there was only one group. And we're going to get the names here in a minute. So, Corporal Preet was on it. So, yeah. there wasn't much left of him to pick up, but they found his camera. And there was an SD card in his camera. And I remember when I got home after all this, the CBC talked about him. They were honoring some soldiers, some of our men who had died there. And they talked about him on the radio and on the internet. And they mounted all the pictures that they found on this SD card. And I was the last photograph on the card. There's nothing much in life that sucks worse than that. That was about the suckiest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I lost a buddy that I really only knew for a week. But, a couple of weeks. But friendships in that situation are formed really quickly. You figure out right away who it is you can trust. And Preed was one of those guys. So that put an incredible damper on the last few days we were to spend in that country. It only solidified more my belief that we were there for nothing. We were there for nothing. That man died for no reason. He just did. They weren't even on a combative mission. They were going over there to make a delivery or pick something up. They didn't go over that mountain to kill anyone. They just were making a delivery, right? And they got shot down. And that man's in his grave. And his name is on that cenotaph over in Mirage, or wherever that thing ended up. And it's just, I look at it, and it's just absolutely fucking pointless. No point. No point whatsoever. So things got pretty black after that. At that point, I think all of us were just like, I've had enough of this shit. We got to get the fuck out of here. And, of course, we had to do one more show. They took us to the stage where we were going to play, which was attached to a building they called the TLS. TLS stood for Taliban's Last Stand. And this building, it was the place where the Taliban was cornered when the NATO forces arrived there. And they lasted under siege there for days. They gathered in this building because it was a big 2 or 3 floor brick building. It was a good place to hole up. And this place was just, it was ridiculous. It was full of holes, bullet holes. There was dried blood all over the inside of it. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And they laughed about it. The soldiers were just like, they did really good in there. And so by this time I was just fucking numb to all of this stuff to begin with. Then they told us there's a couple of suicide bombers just outside the wall. When you're on the stage, you can see the wall right there, just behind us, just behind the audience. There's 2 guys out there that have been waiting for days for you guys to get here. And I thought, holy shit, like how much heavier can this get, right? And I started thinking to myself, again, this occurred to me all the time. I'm just a fucking civilian. I'm not even carrying a gun. I got no responsibilities here to combat this insanity. I'm just here. I'm a guitar player. These guys have to do this every day for months and months and months. And it was lunacy. Just, I don't know how else to describe it. It was absolute insanity what was going on there. And so we started to sort of fall apart a little as a unit because we were all, the reality of the situation was really weighing on everybody. The promoter decided that she wasn't quite getting enough tension. She claimed she fell down out of the latrine and sprained her ankle. The medic, they rushed her to the medic, our medic, and she requested crutches. She did all this bullshit, and the medic looked at me one day and said, "Not a very bad sprain. I couldn't see any damage. There's no bruisings, no nothing, right?" So I was just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, are you going to do this, really? We just lost. Another guy just got fucking killed. There's two people waiting to blow us up while we're playing, and you're worrying about, you got to be the center of attention. And that just pissed me off even more about her. And now maybe she did sprain her ankle, and maybe, whatever, maybe. But there was way too big a deal made out of all of it, and it really pissed a lot of people off, and the crew was just like, come on, like, really, we're gonna do this in the middle of this fucking shitstorm here? And so the only other thing I have to say about Kabul is I loved the British soldiers. They were incredible guys, and women. There were women stationed there, of course, as well. And I don't know why all them soldiers didn't weigh 400 pounds, because when you ate at this place, they deep-fried everything. They flash-fried fucking toast. They deep-fried toast. They didn't toast. They deep-fried it. So your breakfast was deep-fried toast, like 4 pounds of bacon, eggs fried in bacon fat, like basically deep-fried in bacon fat. Everything just looked shiny. Like you could take an egg and rub it on the wall, and the grease would let you see right through the drywall, right? Like it was that bad. The food wasn't very good, and but we survived, and they all joked about it. And they were a good crew of guys, and so then there was one point in the evening I went up on top of this TLS. They took me up there because you could see all around the base from up there. And it was incredible the amount of... If you looked all the way around this place, it wasn't that safe to be up there. They told me, just kind of stay... Don't stand in one place for too long, and stay around the barricades. And there were sandbags and everything up there. And he said, but go take a look, take some pictures, and I did. And it was amazing how much destroyed Russian equipment was just strewn all around the countryside. You could see these blown out tanks and small, it's just, there was all this litter. This military litter junk that the Afghans destroyed when they decimated the Russians that came in there. And you realize that these people just were not conquerable. They were outgunned, outmanned, out-technologized, if that's not a word, but whatever, and all this detritus from the Russian army was just laying everywhere, all around the mountainsides, and yeah, it was just you realize just how messed up all of this was. And again, realize there's no point in us being here. This is not going to change anything. These people decimated the Russian army. They had to retreat in shame. They couldn't take these people over, couldn't control them. And so we did our last show. All the while, the two suicide bombers are just pacing back and forth outside that wall. And they never did blow themselves up, or nobody blew them up. I don't know whether it was there was no way the explosion was going to come through the wall. And I don't know what they thought was going to happen, that they'd get an opportunity to hurt us, but they never did anything. And the next day after we performed, they left. And apparently, I guess they took their dynamite off or whatever they did. I don't know, but so it comes time finally to go home. And that big green plane shows up again, the passenger jet. And Corporal Preed had already been flown out, his body. But Macaulay was waiting for us back in Dubai. We were going to pick, he was at Mirage waiting for us. And so we were going to carry him back. So we flew out of Kabul. I mean, it was the same thing going back to the airport, the terror show, trying to drive that 900 meters back to the airport gate. And when I see the pictures of what's happening there today, I completely understand the abject terror of potentially being caught in that place, trying to get out of the country. We were just a group of 15 people. Imagine thousands of people all trying to get on a plane there. Like, it's unimaginable, And so they took us back. We waited for our flight. It finally showed up. We took off, no problems. Back to Mirage for decompression, they called it. We only stayed there a few days. Last thing I did there was I went up and touched the monument. That was my last thing I did. I went to the monument and where the names were, and I touched it. Preed and Macaulay weren't up there yet, but they were going to be up there. And I said my goodbyes. And we got in the plane and we flew to I think we flew to England again, or Germany, or I don't know where we went. I don't even remember that flight home. I don't. I was in so much shock and just trauma. Like there's no way, unless you've done what I did and what we did, there's no way to describe how it affects you. There's just no way. You just can't, there's no way. It's no wonder that soldiers come back from there completely destroyed, unable to talk about what they did and what they saw, and end up taking their own lives. They can't deal with it. I saw it on a minuscule scale as a civilian, and I couldn't take it. And I don't think a lot of us ever looked at anything the same way ever again. Ever. And so we finally landed in Trenton. We went on the runway. They told us all of the soldiers got off the plane. A commanding officer came up on board and said, all of you must stay here for the ramp ceremony. You're not allowed to be on the tarmac. And we must pull all the blinds down. You're not allowed to see this. You're not allowed to be a part of this at all. You're not military. Pulled all the blinds down, and then I don't know what happened. But 5 minutes later, I think, if you want my honest opinion about it, I think because we lost 2 people out of our crew and were there, virtually right there for it, we were some of the last people to see Macaulay alive and some of the last people to see Preet alive. This high-ranking officer came back on the plane and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, follow me. We're going to let you come out for the ceremony." So, yeah, down the stairs we walked, single file, followed this soldier, was marching solemnly down this line, and they said, "Turn where he turns, don't divert from anywhere," and they took us down in a single file, and the soldier taught us on the fly what to do, and we about faced towards the belly of the plane, and we stood there, and the family came up, wife, children, parents, and that casket came down out of the belly of that plane with a Canadian flag over it. And I watched that woman, his wife, collapse on top of that casket. I could hear her crying. She was 200 feet away from me. I could hear her crying. And then they wheeled the casket towards the buildings, and the family led it. And we stood there for a long, long time while that casket went from the plane to the building. And then the soldier took us, told us, turn, walk, and showed us what we had to do and how we had to act and go and walk, and let us off the airfield. And all of a sudden, we're sitting in the bar in Trenton, in the base there, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes. And it kept on hitting me, It kept on hitting me. A few hours ago, I was in a war zone. And now I'm in Canada. I'm sitting in Trenton, Ontario. I just watched a guy that I know come out of a plane in a box. And now I'm sitting here having a beer and eating pizza. Like, what the fuck? I don't even know. And I was just instantly in the shoes of every soldier I'd ever met. Because I really could imagine what it would be like to be 1,000 times worse than what I went through, which is what these guys go through every day. I could multiply it in my head and go, holy, there's no wonder why there's a problem. There's a serious problem. So that's my story. And I can tell you right now that this was not easy for me to do at all. It's one of the reasons that I didn't do it on the timeline as it happened, because I think it was the only thing in my whole life that I was subconsciously, I left it out. But then when all the trouble started there with the withdrawal from Afghanistan in the last few weeks, I realized that I had to tell the story for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was how profoundly that it affected me and the rest of my life, and in good ways and bad ways. And secondly, me not telling this story dishonors not only the 2 people we lost in that trip, but the other 156 people, or I think that's how many we lost there, 158 people, I think, that died there. And all I can tell you is this. And I know a lot of people won't agree with this. Maybe some people even in the forces won't agree with this. But the Second World War was the last valid war that ever happened. After that, war has only just been a way to make money. It's very sad, but it's true. Governments are installed because they need somebody in charge to funnel money. And all of the companies that build weapons and machinery to fight war make billions of dollars for making that stuff. And they don't give a shit what happens to it afterwards. The evidence of that is the fact that most of the equipment that was brought over to Afghanistan was left there in the hands of the so-called enemy. So if there really was a purpose for going there that was morally honorable, right? That we really were trying to make some kind of social difference in that country, or in Iraq, or Vietnam, or Korea, or any of the places that we've gone and died. If there really was a reason for that, there's no way we'd be leaving billions of dollars worth of equipment over there. It's left there because the people who built it already have the money for it. They don't give a shit what happens to it or what it's used for, nor do they have any guilt over the people it killed. Us and them, right? So, and you're never going to convince me that anybody except those who have their nuclear capability of actually blowing us up without even leaving their house are any threat to us. The only people that are a threat to us are nuclear powers like Russia, North Korea, maybe, and so on, whatever. A nuclear war is a different beast. These guys that are all over the world, I mean, can you imagine, Iraqis landing on the beach at Crescent Beach outside of Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and trying to take over Canada? Or landing on the beach in South Carolina, or New York City? Like, it isn't going to happen, folks. It isn't going to happen. And no matter what happens, terrorism is another beast altogether. It has nothing to do with nations. It has to do with a group of people who believe that the West has invaded them for years and they want them out. That's all it is. That's what terrorism is all about. And it's about trying to get foreigners, invaders, to piss off. And, I realize it's a simplified, that there's way more to it than that, but that is the basic premise. I saw that in talking to Afghanis. I saw that in their faces. I saw that they see us not as rescuers and liberators and builders, and they see us as invaders. No matter what we're doing, good or bad, we're not welcome there. And we never have been, and we never will be. And I think, personally, if you spent the billions, actually now it's getting ridiculous, it's like trillions of dollars, that is spent to send our own people away to kill whoever and die ourselves in the process. If you spent all that money here at home, We would eradicate homelessness, crime, all of these things. It's just ridiculous, the amount of money that's spent on lost causes, which war is. Of any kind, I don't care. War should be fought on your own soil. If you want to fight a war, wait till somebody comes in with a gun and says, "Hey, I'm taking over." Then we can fight them. I'll go to war any day if the fight's right here over in Truro or Halifax or whatever. Give me a gun. I'm going. But I'm not going to fly 14,000 kilometers to fight people I don't even know who the hell they are, and they've never been to Canada, and they never will be. They never will be. They can't get here. None of these people can get here. They don't want to come here. So, and I know all of this is spoken emotionally. There's parts of, socio-economic, governmental, foreign relation, blah, 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 bullshit that I'm leaving out of the picture. But I'm just telling you what the raw reaction is to watching my fellow Canadians and Americans. I have been contacted by hundreds of American veterans who share the same sentiment as me. And I've watched people just deteriorate. I've watched veterans deteriorate to the point where they're either near suicide or actually commit it. Because they come home and all that money that the machinery made while they were over there fighting is suddenly there's no money to help them. There's no money to give them the proper health care. There's no money to give them the proper mental health care. There's housing as a problem. Everything's a problem. They can't hold a job. They can't do... we have to start taking care of these people and stop sending them away to this shit. If you're going to do that, you've got to be responsible for them when they come home. And up until now, North America has done a terrible job of that. Canada and the United States both have done an absolutely shit job of taking care of the people that fight these wars that are nothing but a giant profit machine for everyone involved, the enemy and us. Look what the Taliban's been left with, billions of dollars worth of gear, able to start, some kind of a government that they're now trying to, play in the sandbox with the rest of the world. They've been put on the map by the fact that we went over there and attacked them for no reason. It was no reason. And we can get that's a whole other argument. But anyhow, all I can say to you is this: I love every soldier. The soldiers aren't the problem. The people that control them are the problem. And if we can find a way to stop reacting to everything in the world with violence, there's nothing that we can't do. If we weren't already engaged in violence against, millions of people, billions, they wouldn't be mad at us. There would be no reason for them to seek retribution against us. That's what they're doing. It isn't about that they're trying to convert us to Islam or to communism or any of these things. They're seeking retribution for invading forces coming into their countries, killing their people, killing civilians, on and on that goes. We have to find a better way. We have to find a better way. And until we do, this is just going to be an endless cycle. The same young people are going to go try to serve their country and come back either in a box or unable to cope with the world. And that's not acceptable. They deserve better than that. All people, not just us, all of them, every nation, it's all the same. And I'm going to tell you what one of the last things that Corporal Preed ever said to me, because I mentioned to him that last day, I said, and it was ironic that this conversation took place. I said, I'm glad we're getting out of here. I'm getting this is freaking me out. And Preed looked at me, he said, well, he observed exactly what I've said. He said, you're just a civilian. When we join the forces, we sign a check. I said, really? He said, yeah. It's for up to and including our lives. Boy, was he right.